Once you master your mind, nothing can easily stop you. Not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because you stop allowing every obstacle to determine who you become. The greatest battles are rarely fought outside of you. They are fought in the silent space between what happens and how you respond. Someone can criticize you, reject you, underestimate you, or create an obstacle in your path. But the moment you allow their behavior to control your thoughts, you have handed them power over you. The mind is therefore the first territory you must conquer. Take control of your thoughts because the mind is the first place where victory or defeat begins. Before you act in the physical world, you usually act inside your imagination. You think about what could happen, what people might say, what you might lose, or what you might gain. These thoughts influence your emotions, and your emotions influence your decisions. If your thoughts are constantly controlled by fear, doubt, comparison, anger, or negative assumptions, your actions will eventually reflect them. This is why mastering your mind begins with learning to observe your thoughts instead of automatically believing everything they tell you. A thought can feel convincing without being true. You may think, I cannot do this, but that is a judgment, not a fact. You may think everyone is against me, when perhaps only one person criticized you. You may think, if I fail, everything is over, when failure may simply provide information that helps you improve. The mind has a tendency to create stories, especially when uncertainty is present. If you do not examine those stories, you can begin living according to assumptions rather than reality. Taking control means creating distance between the thought and the decision. When a negative thought appears, do not immediately fight it or obey it. Study it. Ask where it came from. Ask what evidence supports it. Ask whether you would give the same advice to someone you care about. Ask what alternative explanation might exist. This simple process weakens automatic thinking because you stop treating every thought as an unquestionable command. You also need to become aware of repetitive mental patterns. Perhaps you constantly replay past mistakes. Perhaps you imagine future disasters. Perhaps you compare yourself with people who seem more successful. Perhaps you spend hours thinking about what someone said about you. These patterns consume enormous mental energy without necessarily producing useful action. The mind can become addicted to repetition. It returns to familiar worries because familiarity feels easier than uncertainty. But thinking about a problem repeatedly is not the same as solving it. At some point, you must ask whether the thought is producing a useful action. If there is something you can do, do it. If there is nothing you can control, release the thought and redirect your attention. This is mental discipline. Taking control of your thoughts also means choosing what enters your mind. Your environment influences your thinking more than you may realize. The content you consume, the people you spend time with, and the conversations you repeatedly participate in all leave impressions. If you constantly consume anger, negativity, comparison, and meaningless controversy, your mind will eventually reflect that environment. Protecting your mind does not mean avoiding reality. It means becoming selective about what deserves repeated attention. Learn to consume information with purpose. Read deeply instead of endlessly scrolling. Listen to ideas without immediately absorbing them. Give yourself periods of silence so you can hear your own thoughts. Another important principle is that you should not wait for your thoughts to become perfect before acting. Some people become trapped in overthinking because they want complete certainty. They analyze every possibility until action feels impossible. But certainty rarely arrives before action. Sometimes you need to act, observe the result, and adjust. Thought should guide action, not replace it. When you think clearly and then move, you create experience, and experience gives your mind better information. You should also understand that controlling your thoughts does not mean controlling every thought that enters your mind. You cannot prevent every unwanted thought. Trying to eliminate every negative thought can actually make you more focused on it. Instead, allow thoughts to appear without giving them automatic authority. Notice them, evaluate them, and choose whether to engage. A strong mind is not a mind that never experiences fear or doubt. It is a mind that can experience those things without becoming their servant. Over time, this practice changes your relationship with yourself. You become less reactive, more thoughtful, and more deliberate. Instead of allowing every thought to determine your behavior, you begin choosing which thoughts deserve your energy. That is where mental freedom begins. Not when the mind becomes completely silent, but when you become the person who decides which thoughts will lead you and which ones you will simply let pass. Master your emotional reactions because emotions can become powerful forces when understood, but destructive forces when allowed to control your decisions. Anger, fear, jealousy, pride, resentment, and insecurity are not signs of weakness by themselves. They are natural human responses, but the danger appears when you react automatically without giving yourself time to think. A few seconds of uncontrolled emotion can create consequences that last for months or even years. One angry message can damage a relationship. One jealous decision can destroy an opportunity. One fearful reaction can make you abandon something important. One moment of wounded pride can prevent you from admitting a mistake that would have helped you grow. The person who cannot manage emotional reactions becomes predictable, and predictable people are easier to manipulate. If someone knows exactly what makes you angry, insecure, or desperate, they can influence your behavior simply by triggering those emotions. Mastery begins by learning your triggers. Pay attention to the situations that repeatedly change your emotional state. Notice what people say that immediately makes you defensive. Notice what situations make you anxious. Notice when another person's success creates uncomfortable feelings. Notice what happens just before you lose patience. Instead of judging yourself, study yourself. Your reactions can reveal hidden beliefs. If criticism makes you extremely angry, perhaps you have attached your identity to being right. If someone else's success makes you jealous, perhaps it reveals an ambition you have not admitted. If rejection makes you desperate, perhaps you depend too heavily on external approval. Understanding the source of an emotion gives you more control over its expression. The next step is creating a pause between the emotion and the action. This pause may be only a few seconds, but it can completely change the outcome. When anger rises, do not immediately respond. When you feel insulted, take time before speaking. When fear appears, ask whether you are facing genuine danger or simply uncertainty. When jealousy appears, step back and examine what the feeling is trying to tell you. The pause does not eliminate the emotion. It gives your rational mind an opportunity to participate in the decision. This is one of the simplest and most powerful forms of self-control. You also need to understand the difference between acknowledging an emotion and obeying it. You can be angry without becoming aggressive. You can be afraid without running away. You can be disappointed without becoming bitter. You can be jealous without attacking the person who has what you want. You can feel insecure without allowing insecurity to determine your worth. Emotional maturity means allowing yourself to experience feelings while maintaining authority over your actions. Suppressing emotions is not the answer. If you constantly pretend that nothing affects you, emotions may accumulate beneath the surface and eventually appear in unhealthy ways. Instead, recognize the emotion honestly. Name it, understand it, then decide what response matches your values. This approach turns emotion into information. Anger may reveal that a boundary has been crossed. Fear may reveal that preparation is needed. Jealousy may reveal a goal you secretly desire. Sadness may reveal that something mattered deeply to you. Once you understand the message, you can choose what to do with it. Another important part of emotional mastery is refusing to let temporary feelings become permanent decisions. A bad day can make you want to quit a good goal. A painful conversation can make you want to end a valuable relationship. A moment of rejection can make you believe you are not worthy. But emotions change. What feels permanent at midnight may look completely different the next morning. Give important decisions enough time for emotional intensity to settle. This does not mean avoiding action forever. It means refusing to make major choices while your judgment is clouded. You should also recognize when others are attempting to provoke you. Some people use insults, criticism, silence, or emotional pressure to get reactions. If you immediately respond, they gain control over the interaction. If you remain calm, observe what is happening, and choose your response deliberately, you remove much of their influence. Sometimes the strongest move is to answer calmly, sometimes it is to walk away, sometimes it is to say nothing at all. The important thing is that the decision comes from you rather than from the emotional trigger. Mastering emotional reactions does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means becoming steady enough to feel deeply without being controlled easily. Your emotions remain part of you, but they no longer hold the steering wheel. You listen to them, learn from them, and then decide. That is when emotion becomes a source of awareness rather than a source of weakness. Train your attention like a weapon because your attention determines where your energy goes, and whatever controls your attention can gradually control the direction of your life. In a world filled with constant stimulation, attention has become one of the most valuable forms of personal power. Every notification, message, video, advertisement, argument, and distraction is competing for a small piece of your mind. Most people give their attention away without realizing it. They begin the morning by checking their phones, spend hours moving between different forms of entertainment, respond to every interruption, and then wonder why they cannot concentrate on the goals that matter most. The problem is not always a lack of intelligence or ability. Often, the problem is that their mental energy is scattered. A powerful mind must learn to choose where its attention goes instead of allowing the environment to choose for it. The first step is recognizing that attention is limited. You cannot give everything your full concentration. If you attempt to focus on 10 things at once, you usually end up giving each one only a fraction of your mental energy. This creates the illusion of productivity while reducing the quality of your thinking. When you are working on something important, remove unnecessary interruptions and remain with the task long enough to understand it deeply. This may feel uncomfortable at first because the modern mind becomes accustomed to constant stimulation. The moment something becomes boring or difficult, the instinct is often to escape. But that instinct can be retrained. When you remain with a difficult task instead of immediately searching for entertainment, you strengthen your ability to concentrate. Focus is therefore not simply a natural talent. It is a form of mental conditioning. Every time you resist a distraction, you practice control. Every time you return to the task after your mind wanders, you strengthen your attention. You should also become selective about what deserves your mental energy. Not every argument deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves consideration. Not every piece of information deserves to be remembered. Not every controversy has anything to do with your goals. If you allow every external event to occupy your thoughts, you leave less space for meaningful work. Ask yourself regularly, does this deserve my attention? This question can prevent enormous amounts of wasted energy. Your attention should be directed toward things that improve your knowledge, skills, relationships, character, or future. Another important principle is creating an environment that supports concentration. Do not depend entirely on willpower when you can remove unnecessary temptations. Put your phone away while working. Silence notifications. Close irrelevant tabs. Keep your workspace organized. Decide beforehand what you intend to accomplish. When distractions are less accessible, focus becomes easier. This is not about creating a perfect environment. It is about reducing the number of unnecessary battles your mind has to fight. You should also train yourself to tolerate boredom. Deep learning, meaningful work, and mastery often contain long periods that are not exciting. A person who requires constant stimulation will struggle to remain committed when progress becomes repetitive, but repetition is where skill develops. The athlete repeats movements, the writer revises sentences, the student studies difficult concepts, the entrepreneur handles ordinary tasks, the artist practices techniques. None of these activities is exciting every second. The ability to continue without constant stimulation separates disciplined people from those who depend on novelty. Attention also becomes stronger when you learn to control emotional distractions. Sometimes your body is physically present, but your mind is somewhere else because you are replaying an argument, worrying about the future, or thinking about someone's opinion. When this happens, gently return your attention to the present task. You do not need to solve every thought immediately. Write down important concerns if necessary, then return to what is in front of you. Your mind will wander. That is normal. The skill is learning how to bring it back. Over time, this repeated return becomes mental strength. The goal is not to become someone who never gets distracted. The goal is to become someone who notices distraction quickly and knows how to redirect attention deliberately. When you control your attention, you control where your effort accumulates. You can spend years reacting to whatever demands your attention, or you can decide what deserves it and build your life around those priorities. Attention transforms intention into action because what you repeatedly focus on eventually receives your time, energy, and effort. Protect it carefully because a mind that can concentrate deeply becomes capable of learning faster, working better, thinking more clearly, and moving toward important goals without constantly being pulled away by the noise surrounding it. Turn fear into focus by understanding that fear is not always a signal to stop. Often it is a signal that you are standing near something uncertain, difficult, or important. Fear appears when the mind cannot predict what will happen, and because the human mind naturally prefers certainty, it often creates negative possibilities before anything has actually happened. You imagine failure, rejection, embarrassment, loss, or disappointment, and these imagined outcomes can become so powerful that they feel like reality. The problem is that fear becomes stronger when you continuously avoid the thing that created it. Avoidance gives you immediate relief, but it also teaches your mind that the situation was too dangerous to face. The next time you encounter something similar, the fear becomes even stronger. This creates a cycle in which fear produces avoidance, avoidance produces temporary comfort, and temporary comfort strengthens fear. Breaking this cycle requires action, but not reckless action. The goal is to move toward fear intelligently. When you are afraid of failing at something important, prepare more carefully instead of abandoning the opportunity. Learn the necessary skills, study the situation, identify the risks, create a plan, then take the next step. Preparation turns vague fear into specific problems that can be managed. Fear often feels enormous when it remains undefined. Once you break it into smaller parts, you discover that many of the things you feared can actually be addressed. Another important principle is separating real danger from emotional discomfort. Your mind can react to embarrassment almost as strongly as it reacts to genuine physical danger, but these experiences are not the same. Being criticized may feel painful, but it is not necessarily a threat to your future. Making a mistake may feel humiliating, but it can also become valuable experience. Having an uncomfortable conversation may create temporary tension, but avoiding it may create a much larger problem later. When you learn to distinguish danger from discomfort, your choices become clearer. You stop treating every unpleasant feeling as a reason to retreat. Fear can also reveal where you need development. If speaking in front of people scares you, perhaps the answer is not to avoid public speaking forever, but to practice gradually. If starting a difficult project frightens you, perhaps you need better preparation and a smaller first step. If rejection terrifies you, perhaps you need to practice hearing no without interpreting it as a judgment of your entire identity. In this way, fear becomes a map. It points toward areas where greater competence and confidence can be developed. Confidence itself is often misunderstood. Many people wait to feel confident before acting, but confidence frequently comes after action rather than before it. You become confident because you have evidence that you can handle difficult situations. The first presentation may be uncomfortable. The first difficult conversation may be awkward. The first attempt may fail. But each experience gives you information and makes the next attempt less mysterious. Eventually, what once created intense fear becomes familiar. This is why repeated exposure to manageable challenges can transform your relationship with fear. You do not need to attack your biggest fear immediately. Start with challenges that stretch you without overwhelming you, then gradually increase the difficulty. Every successful experience teaches your mind that discomfort can be survived and uncertainty can be navigated. You should also avoid allowing fear to become an excuse for endless preparation. Preparation is valuable, but there is a point where additional preparation becomes another form of avoidance. You can research forever, plan forever, and wait forever for the perfect moment. Eventually, you must act and allow reality to teach you what preparation alone cannot. Action produces feedback. Feedback produces adjustment. Adjustment produces improvement. This cycle is far more powerful than endless thinking. Fear also becomes easier to manage when you focus on the next action rather than the entire future. Looking at a huge goal can create overwhelming uncertainty. Instead, ask what can be done today. One phone call, one page, 1 hour of practice, one difficult conversation, one application, one workout, one focus session. The next step gives your mind something concrete to handle. You do not need to know every step of the journey before taking the first one. As you move, the path becomes clearer. Over time, fear stops being a wall and becomes a source of information. It tells you where preparation is needed, where courage can be practiced, and where growth is possible. You begin to realize that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the decision to remain focused on what matters even when fear is present. Discipline yourself when motivation disappears, because motivation is temporary, while discipline is what allows you to continue when the excitement has faded. At the beginning of any goal, motivation can feel powerful. You imagine the future, feel inspired, make plans, and promise yourself that everything will change. But eventually the excitement becomes ordinary, the work becomes repetitive, progress becomes slower, you become tired, distracted, or uncertain. This is the moment when many people quit because they believed motivation was supposed to remain constant. It does not. A disciplined person understands that feelings change, but commitments can remain. You do not need to feel motivated every morning to take meaningful action. You need to know what matters and develop systems that make action easier to repeat. Discipline begins with making clear commitments. If your goal is vague, your behavior will also be vague. Instead of saying, I want to become better, define what you will actually do. Study for a specific amount of time. Practice a particular skill. Exercise according to a realistic schedule. Complete an important task before entertainment. Clear commitments remove some of the daily negotiation that drains your energy. You know what needs to happen, so you spend less time debating with yourself. One of the greatest enemies of discipline is the habit of negotiating with every impulse. You tell yourself that you will work later because you are tired. You will exercise tomorrow because today was difficult. You will start next week because the current week is already busy. Sometimes rest is necessary, but if every uncomfortable moment becomes a reason to postpone, your goals will always remain behind your impulses. Discipline means learning to recognize when your mind is searching for a convenient escape. Another important principle is starting small. Many people create extreme plans because they are excited, then become overwhelmed and abandon them. A better approach is to create habits that are challenging enough to matter, but realistic enough to repeat. 10 focused minutes today can be more valuable than an unrealistic promise of 5 hours tomorrow that never happens. Consistency creates momentum. Once the behavior becomes familiar, you can gradually increase the difficulty. Discipline grows through repetition rather than dramatic declarations. You should also stop measuring your progress only through immediate results. Some of the most important work produces delayed rewards. You may study for weeks before understanding improves. You may train for months before physical changes become obvious. You may work on a project for a long time before anyone notices. If you depend entirely on visible results to stay motivated, you will struggle during the periods when progress is hidden. Learn to value the process itself. Your responsibility is to perform the work you can control today. Results will arrive according to factors you cannot completely control. Discipline also requires protecting your environment. If your phone constantly interrupts you, create distance. If certain environments encourage distraction, change them when possible. If you know that particular activities consume hours of your attention, place limits around them. Do not rely entirely on willpower. Good systems reduce the number of unnecessary decisions you must make. You should also understand that discipline is not punishment. It is self-respect expressed through action. When you do something difficult because you know it serves your future, you are telling yourself that your long-term goals matter more than temporary comfort. This strengthens your relationship with yourself. Every promise you keep creates trust. Every commitment you honor makes future discipline easier. Over time, you begin to identify as someone who follows through. There will still be days when you fail. You may miss a workout, waste a day, lose focus, or break a commitment. Do not turn one mistake into an excuse to abandon everything. Correct the behavior quickly. Return to the routine. Discipline is not perfection, it is the ability to return. The strongest people are not those who never lose momentum. They are those who know how to rebuild it. When motivation disappears, discipline becomes the bridge between intention and achievement. It keeps you moving through ordinary days, difficult days, and uncertain days. Eventually, the work that once required constant self-control becomes part of your normal behavior. You no longer need to wait for inspiration because action has become a habit. That is when discipline becomes a form of freedom. Instead of being controlled by your changing moods, you become capable of choosing your actions according to the future you want to create. Become unstoppable through self-mastery by understanding that true power does not come from controlling other people or eliminating every obstacle. It comes from becoming so disciplined in your thoughts, emotions, attention, and actions that difficulties cannot easily take you away from your purpose. An unstoppable person is not someone who never fails, never feels fear, or never experiences doubt. Such a person does not exist. The difference is that when failure or fear appears, he does not allow it to become the final decision. He learns, adjusts, and continues moving. Self-mastery begins with taking responsibility for your inner world. You cannot control everything that happens around you, but you can control how you respond. Someone may criticize you, reject you, or underestimate you, but they do not have to determine your confidence. A plan may fail, but failure does not have to destroy your direction. A difficult day may interrupt your progress, but it does not have to become a permanent excuse. When you understand this, external circumstances lose some of their power over you. You also become unstoppable when you stop depending on constant motivation. Motivation rises and falls, but discipline gives you a stable foundation. You learn to work when you feel inspired and when you do not. You learn to continue when progress is visible and when it is hidden. Each time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen self-trust. Each time you return after failure, you strengthen resilience. Over time, these small victories create a powerful identity. You become someone who knows how to continue. Another part of self-mastery is learning from obstacles instead of automatically seeing them as enemies. An obstacle may reveal a weakness in your preparation. Failure may show you that your strategy needs to change. Criticism may contain information you need. Rejection may redirect you toward a better opportunity. The powerful mind does not waste every difficult experience on resentment. It asks what can be learned and what action should come next. This does not mean accepting every situation passively. It means responding intelligently instead of emotionally. An unstoppable person also protects attention. The world will constantly offer distractions, arguments, comparisons, and temptations. If you allow every external event to pull your mind away from your priorities, your energy becomes scattered. Focus on what you can influence. Give your best attention to the work, relationships, skills, and goals that genuinely matter. Eventually, self-mastery creates a kind of inner stability. You still experience fear, disappointment, anger, and uncertainty, but these emotions no longer automatically control your behavior. You can feel them and continue choosing deliberately. That is the real meaning of becoming unstoppable. It does not mean that nothing can hurt you or slow you down. It means that when life knocks you off course, you possess the discipline and awareness to find your direction again. The world may create obstacles, but your response remains your territory.